The moment I saw the footage, my skin crawled. It wasn't the kind of creepiness you get from a ghost story whispered around a campfire, or a shadow lurking in the corner of your eye. This was raw, undeniable, and horrifying. Caught cold on a CCTV camera in a decrepit apartment building where no one expected anything other than the ordinary. The building itself had been there for decades, worn down by time, soaked in loneliness. Cracks spiderwebbed the walls, pipes groaned like tired old men, and the flickering fluorescent lights in the hallways cast a sickly pallor over everything. Locals whispered about strange noises, unexplained cold spots, and tenants who left without warning. But no one had any concrete proof, until the night the camera captured something impossible. The video opens with a quiet hum, the usual static of security footage, grainy, black and white. It shows a man stepping out of his apartment around midnight. He's a tenant no one paid much attention to. Late 30s, unremarkable clothes, shoulders slouched like the weight of the world was settling on him. He pauses in the hallway, eyes darting. The light above buzzes overhead, flickering on and off. Then he heads toward the stairwell. That's when the figure appears. It doesn't enter the frame with any fanfare or ghostly flair. No mist rolling in, no ghastly screams. Just a dark shape, almost blurred, sliding silently along the wall like an unwelcome stain. The figure is tall but strangely distorted, limbs twisting at unnatural angles, face shifting between clarity and fuzziness. It moves with a fluid grace, the kind you don't expect from something heavy or solid. Its presence warps the light around it, shadows deepening unnaturally, colors draining. The tenant pauses, his body stiffening. He looks toward the figure but doesn't scream. There's no time. The ghost reaches out, or what looks like an arm, and touches him. The contact is almost casual, but it's enough. Suddenly, the man's eyes widen with shock. His body jerks involuntarily, pulled forward.
No struggle.
No resistance. Just a slow, inevitable drag toward the basement door. A door usually locked tight, a place tenants never enter or speak of. The camera catches the faintest glimmer of something slipping beneath the door before it slams shut with a deafening bang. Then silence. The man disappears. The ghost vanishes. The hallway returns to its eerie stillness, as if nothing had happened. For days, people talked. The building's tenants refused to go near the basement. Rumors swirled like smoke. Some said the man had been possessed, dragged into a place where time didn't exist. Others whispered about ancient spirits bound beneath the building, hungry for souls. But what the video shows is undeniable. This was no accident, no natural event. This was a force with intent, a predator lurking in shadows, waiting. I watched the footage again and again. The ghost's movements were hypnotic. The way it glided, pulling the tenant like a thread through a needle's eye. And the man? He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just walked with it? Or was he being led? The video's graininess obscured details, but I swear I saw tears streaking the man's face. Tears born from fear or maybe surrender. That night, the basement was searched. No sign of the tenant. No evidence of forced entry.
No footprints.
Nothing but silence. The building management dismissed the whole thing as a prank or a hallucination. But the residents knew better. They knew something dark had returned. The basement door is always locked now. But the strange noises continue. The cold spots grow colder. And sometimes, when the lights flicker, tenants swear they see shadows moving beneath the floorboards. Sometimes, just before midnight, a faint whisper curls through the hallways. A voice pleading, demanding, or warning. The question that haunts everyone is simple but terrifying. What happens in that basement? Where does the ghost take its victims? And can anyone ever come back? I started digging. I talked to neighbors, former tenants, anyone who'd listen. Old records revealed the building had a history. Years ago, it was built on the site of an old asylum. One that closed abruptly after a series of unexplained deaths. The basement? It was the asylum's holding area, cells, isolation rooms, a place for the worst cases. Stories speak of brutal treatments, tortured souls, and experiments that pushed the boundaries of science and sanity. Could the ghost be one of those tortured souls, bound to the basement seeking vengeance or release, or something worse? Something that doesn't rest. I won't lie. Every time I think about that footage, my heart races. The idea that something unseen is capable of dragging a man into darkness, with no fight, no trace, it breaks the logic of our world. It breaks the laws of nature. Tonight, I'm going to take you inside that building, inside that basement, where shadows live, where the forgotten scream, where a ghost waits patiently, and you'll see what the camera saw, because sometimes the lens catches more than we want. The night I decided to go back, to see that apartment building with my own eyes, the air felt thicker, not just thick with humidity or the cold bite of a late autumn evening, but heavy, like the atmosphere itself was weighed down by something unseen. I stood outside the old building, its sagging facade illuminated faintly by the flickering street lamps. A few windows had lights on, but mostly the place looked abandoned, like a forgotten relic on the edge of the city. Before stepping inside, I reviewed the CCTV footage again on my phone. The grainy, black and white video that had gone viral locally, but was quickly pulled down by some unknown authority. The part where the shadowy figure drags the tenant to the basement stuck with me like a nightmare I couldn't shake. I pushed open the creaking front door. It groaned like a warning, the smell of mold and rot rushing out to greet me. The narrow hallway was exactly like in the footage. Peeling paint, flickering overhead bulbs, the same heavy silence. I started walking, every step echoing down the corridor. It was colder than outside. Not just a degree or two, but a biting cold that crept inside your bones and refused to leave. My breath fogged in front of me, even though the thermometer said it was just above freezing. As I approached the basement door, I felt a wave of something. Dread, maybe, or something worse, wash over me. The door was old metal, rusted around the edges, with a padlock that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. But the lock wasn't locked. It hung loosely, swinging slightly as if recently disturbed. I pushed the door open. A rush of icy air hit my face, carrying whispers. Faint, unintelligible murmurs barely audible, but unmistakably human voices. The stairwell plunged into pitch darkness. I pulled out my flashlight and pointed it down. The stairs looked ancient, worn smooth by years of use. Shadows pooled thick at the bottom. I stepped inside. With each step down, the temperature dropped further, the air growing damp and heavy with decay. My flashlight caught glimpses of rusted pipes, peeling walls, and strange symbols scratched into the concrete. Spirals, circles, marks that made no sense but felt deeply wrong. Halfway down, I stopped. The whispers grew louder, voices overlapping, begging, laughing, crying. I felt my heart race, but I forced myself onward. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a long corridor lined with metal doors, some barred, others hanging open. I passed one room where the door had been ripped off its hinges. Inside, I saw remnants of chains bolted into the floor. Rust stains streaked the concrete walls. The faint smell of old blood lingered. My skin prickled. I heard a sound behind me, a slow, deliberate scraping. I spun around. Nothing, just shadows. Then I heard it again. A low, guttural breathing. Not mine, something else. Came from the far end of the corridor. I moved cautiously, shining my light ahead. The beam caught movement, a figure flickering just beyond sight. I called out. No answer. The air grew heavier, the whispers turning into incoherent voices pleading for release, for mercy, for help. I felt a tug, not physical but mental, pulling me toward a door cracked slightly ajar at the end of the hall. I approached. The door was cold to the touch. Inside, the room was empty except for an old chair, tipped on its side, and a broken mirror hanging on the far wall. My flashlight flickered. For a moment, the mirror reflected something behind me. A shadowy figure, face distorted and twisted in silent scream. I whipped around. Nothing. Then the whispers turned into a scream. A piercing, agonizing sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I covered my ears, stumbling backward, but the sound followed me, echoing down the halls, rattling the very walls. In a panic, I fled back up the stairs, gasping for air as the basement door slammed shut behind me. Outside, the night was still and silent. I wasn't alone. A cold presence lingered behind me, a shadow that followed every step. That night, I barely slept. The image of the ghost dragging the tenant, the screams echoing in that cursed basement, haunted my dreams. In the following days, I interviewed residents. A woman named Maria, whose apartment was next to the basement entrance, told me about a strange cold spot outside her door. She heard footsteps pacing beneath her floorboards at night, and once, she saw a faint figure standing in the hallway, tall, shadowy, with eyes glowing like embers. Another tenant described waking to find scratches on his door, long, deep marks, like claws. The more I learned, the clearer it became. The ghost wasn't just a spirit trapped in the building. It was something darker, something hungry, something that used the basement as its lair, a place where it forced its victims to disappear. The tenant dragged into the basement was never seen again. No police report, no missing persons case, just a hole in reality where a man once stood, and nothing remains. I returned to the building one last time. The basement door was sealed shut, covered in warning signs and old symbols painted in fading red. But the cold still seeped through, and when I looked into the cracked windows, I swear I saw a figure watching me, silent, waiting. This isn't just a haunting, it's a nightmare rooted in the bones of the building, and the CCTV camera caught a glimpse of its terrible truth. Tomorrow, I'll tell you about what the ghost wants, about the fate of those it drags into the basement, and why no one has ever escaped. The truth about what happens inside the basement is something no one wants to speak of aloud, but it's impossible to ignore once you've glimpsed the terror lurking beneath that locked door. The tenant who was forced inside by that ghostly presence? He's not the first, and sadly, he won't be the last. I started digging deeper into the building's past, talking to former residents, maintenance workers, and even local historians. What I found was a disturbing pattern. Over the years, several people vanished without explanation. Police reports were scarce, some were dismissed as runaways or mental health crises, but the disappearance rates were far too high for coincidence. One night, I met with a former resident named Carlos, a wiry man in his 50s with haunted eyes. He told me about the basement, about how it's not just a physical place, but a prison for the lost. "It's alive down there," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "It twists and shifts, feeds on fear, on hope, on the people it traps." Carlos had narrowly escaped. He described being dragged inside one night while working late, only to find himself in a shifting maze of corridors and rooms that defied logic. The walls breathed, and the floor seemed to pulse beneath his feet. Shadows whispered secrets, and unseen hands grazed his skin. Every door he tried to open led to another dead end, another room of horrors. The most terrifying part? The basement showed him visions, memories not his own, faces of those who had disappeared, and a dark figure that watched from the shadows with eyes like burning coals. Carlos managed to break free by sheer will, running blindly until he burst through the exit stairwell. But he said he left a part of himself behind, a shadow tethered forever to the basement's hunger. Then there's the story of Lila, a young woman who was a photographer obsessed with urban exploration. She sneaked into the building one night, determined to capture images of the infamous basement. She brought no flashlight, relying on her camera's night vision. Her footage is chilling. It shows her descending the stairs, camera shaking, breath ragged. As she explores, the basement seems to close in, hallways folding like paper, doors appearing and disappearing. Her panicked voice whispers warnings. "I can't find the exit. It's changing." At one point, the camera picks up faint figures standing just beyond the beam of light, their faces distorted, eyes hollow. Suddenly, Lila is grabbed from behind, her scream cutting off abruptly. The camera falls to the ground, capturing only a glimpse of a dark, shifting shape moving over it before the footage ends. Lila was never found. The basement's shifting nature isn't just architectural. It's supernatural. Tenants describe feeling trapped in time and space, unable to distinguish reality from nightmare. Some claim to have heard their own voices calling from the darkness, or seen reflections of themselves twisted and broken in cracked mirrors. And then there are the markings. Strange symbols scratched into walls and floors, appearing overnight, glowing faintly in the dark. Some think they are wards. Others believe they're part of an ancient curse tied to the land. The ghost seen in the CCTV is more than a spirit. It's the basement's sentinel, a force that drags the living into its ever-changing labyrinth, feeding the darkness. Tenants report hearing scratching noises beneath their floors, cold hands reaching under doors, and shadowy figures watching from dark corners. Many have moved out, unable to bear the constant fear. But the building still stands. The basement door remains locked but never truly sealed. And the ghost waits, hungry. Last month, I obtained access to a maintenance log revealing strange incidents. Tools disappearing, unexplained electrical failures, and security cameras malfunctioning around midnight. One entry chillingly notes, security footage captured unidentified figure dragging tenant into basement. Video corrupted shortly after. Incident unresolved. The management's silence speaks volumes. The basement door is the gateway, the prison, the monster, and once the ghost pulls you in, escape is almost impossible. Tomorrow, I'll share the terrifying final accounts, the desperate attempts to break free, and what happens when you fail. Because in that basement, failure isn't just losing. It's becoming part of the darkness itself. I want you to feel the weight of what I'm about to tell you because the basement isn't just a place. It's a trap, a nightmare shaped by something ancient and unforgiving. The tenants who disappear, they don't just vanish. They become part of a horror so profound that even survivors barely live to tell the tale. One such survivor, Elena, was a middle-aged woman who lived in the building for years. She told me her story in a quiet cafe, eyes darting nervously as if the basement was lurking nearby, ready to pull her back in. She described the night the basement claimed her younger brother. It began with strange noises, whispers and footsteps when no one else was home. She ignored them at first, chalking it up to the building's age. But then her brother started having nightmares. Terrible, vivid dreams of being dragged through endless tunnels, his screams echoing in the dark. Then he disappeared. Elena found herself drawn to the basement door night after night, compelled by something she couldn't resist. One evening, she forced it open. The darkness inside was suffocating, a cold so deep it froze her blood. She stepped in, and the door slammed shut behind her. The basement was a maze of shifting walls and corridors that twisted in impossible ways. Rooms appeared and vanished, doors led nowhere, and the shadows seemed to watch her every move. The whispers grew louder, voices overlapping, pleading, warning, screaming. In one room, she found a mirror cracked like shattered ice. In its reflection, she saw faces, not her own, twisted in agony, trapped behind the glass. The air was thick with despair, the floor beneath her feet vibrating like a living thing. She wandered for hours, or was it days? Time lost meaning. At some point, a dark figure appeared, a shadow with glowing eyes, silent but terrifying. It reached for her, cold fingers brushing her skin. She ran, the walls closing in behind her. When she finally burst through the exit, she was changed. Hollow-eyed, whispering warnings, forever tethered to the basement's hunger. Another account comes from Marco, a security guard who worked in the building. One night, during a routine patrol, he noticed the basement door was slightly open, impossible since it was always locked. As he approached, a cold breeze hit him, and faint chanting drifted from below. He shone his flashlight down the stairwell but saw nothing. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the bottom, a man, or something like one, dragged by unseen hands deeper into the darkness. Marco called out but received only silence. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut. Panicked, he tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. He called for help, banging on the door until his knuckles bled. When backup arrived, the door was locked tight. No sign of Marco, The building management later dismissed the incident, blaming Marco's disappearance on personal issues, but tenants whispered that the ghost had claimed another soul. The basement's hunger is endless. It adapts, it learns, it uses fear as a weapon, and it never stops. Locals have tried to ward off the darkness with symbols, salt lines, and prayers, but nothing holds. The building remains a tomb, a prison, a gateway. The ghost in the CCTV isn't just forcing tenants into the basement. It's marking them, claiming them, transforming them into shadows bound to the labyrinth. I asked myself, what is this entity? Where did it come from? Why this basement? Some believe it's a curse born from the asylum that once stood on this land. Others say it's a remnant of something far older, a dark presence tied to the earth itself. One thing is certain. The basement is no longer just a physical place. It's a dimension of terror, a void where souls are trapped in eternal torment. The tenants who escaped carry scars, visible and invisible. Many speak of nightmares, whispers in the dark, and a creeping shadow that follows them. The ghost never lets go. Tomorrow, I will tell you the story of the last known survivor's desperate escape and the terrible price he paid for his freedom. Because the basement's grip is merciless, and in the end, it always demands a toll. The last known survivor's story is one that chills every bone and shatters every shred of hope that anyone could truly escape the basement's grasp. His name was Daniel, a quiet man in his early 30s who worked as a janitor in the building. Unlike others, he wasn't curious or reckless. He simply found himself trapped one terrible night, forced to confront the nightmare in a way no one else had dared. It started as a routine shift. Daniel was cleaning the hallways when the power suddenly went out. The building was plunged into darkness, thick and suffocating. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long, wavering shadows that danced along cracked walls. The sudden silence was unnatural, broken only by a low hum that seemed to come from deep within the building. When Daniel reached the basement door to check the electrical panel, he found it slightly open. A chill washed over him, colder than anything he'd ever experienced. Ignoring the primal warning screaming in his gut, he stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air changed, felt like drowning and freezing all at once. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing with a life of their own. The floor shifted beneath his feet, warping and twisting in impossible angles. Doors appeared and vanished. Corridors stretched endlessly or folded back into themselves like a maze from hell. Daniel's flashlight flickered violently, then died, plunging him into pitch black. Then came the whispers, soft at first, then growing louder, overlapping voices chanting in a language that was older than time itself. Voices that promised escape but threatened damnation. The voices called his name, pleaded with him, warned him to turn back. But turning back was impossible. He ran or tried to. Every direction looked the same. Every door led to another dead end or worse. Rooms filled with grotesque shadows that twisted and reached out to touch him. At one point, Daniel stumbled into a room filled with mirrors, cracked, distorted, reflecting countless versions of himself. Each reflection was twisted, screaming silently, eyes wide with terror. In one reflection, the figure smiled back at him, a cold, cruel smile, as if inviting him to join the darkness. Panic overwhelmed him. He smashed the nearest mirror and fled. But the labyrinth wasn't done. The walls closed in. A cold hand grabbed his ankle. He fell. The shadows surrounded him. He screamed. Hours or maybe days later, Daniel was found crawling near the building's entrance, battered and broken. His eyes were hollow, his mind shattered. He whispered warnings that made no sense. About the ghost, the labyrinth, the basement. He was never the same. Daniel's story ended quietly. He moved away, disappeared from the building's records. But those who spoke to him said the basement's shadow had marked him, followed him, and then the CCTV footage resurfaced, the ghost dragging a tenant down into that basement once again. The cycle continues. The building waits. The basement hungers. So what does this all mean? The basement is not just a prison. It's a predator. It's a void that feeds on the living, and the ghost is its enforcer. Each victim becomes a shadow trapped forever, a whisper in the dark, another piece of the labyrinth's soul. The building stands still, but beneath its foundation, the basement shifts and breathes, waiting for the next tenant to fall into its endless nightmare. If you ever come across a place where shadows move on their own, where cold spots freeze your soul, and where doors lead to nowhere, run. Because some places don't want you to leave, and some ghosts never stop hunting. This is not fiction. This is a warning, a true story captured on camera. The footage that no one wants to see, but everyone should. Because sometimes the darkness is closer than you think. And sometimes the basement is watching.